The wind rolled softly over the vast Texas plains, brushing against the golden grass that danced beneath a bleeding sunset. Dust shimmered in the air, stirred by the hooves of a horse making its slow way toward the ranch. On its back sat a woman named Clara Hayes, her posture proud, but her heart carrying the quiet ache of a truth she could never outrun. She had come here to start over, far away from pitying glances and whispered words that followed her everywhere else. The ranch was owned by Luke Granger, a man whose life had been marked by both love and loss. His wife had died 3 years ago, leaving him with 3 small children and a ranch that stretched farther than any man could manage alone. He wasn't looking for love, he wasn't even looking for help. But fate has its way of knocking when a man least expects it. Clara stepped down from her horse, dusting off her dress as Luke approached. He was taller than she'd imagined, with sun-worn hands, a weathered face, and eyes that had seen too much but still carried warmth. "You must be Miss Hayes," he said, his voice deep but kind. "Yes, sir," she replied softly, adjusting her hat. "The agency said you needed help with the children and the home." He nodded. "And you're sure you want this job? It's a hard life out here. The mornings start before dawn, and the nights don't end till long after the stars come out." Clara met his gaze. "I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Granger. I just need a place where no one asks too many questions." He studied her for a moment. There was something behind her words, something heavy, but he didn't press. "Well," he finally said, "around here, we don't have time for gossip. Just chores." That was how it began, quietly, without fanfare. The first few days were all work. Clara cooked, mended clothes, and helped the children with their lessons. She moved like someone trying to keep busy enough to forget. Luke noticed it but said nothing. His children, Emma, Jacob, and little Sarah, took to her faster than he expected. She told them stories before bed, sang lullabies when storms rolled through, and somehow, the house that had felt so empty for years began to hum again with laughter. One evening, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside, Luke found Clara sitting by the window, staring at the horizon. "You miss someone?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, her hands tightening around her cup. "No," she whispered, "just something." He waited, and slowly, she began to speak. "I was married once," she said softly, her eyes distant. "A good man. We wanted a family more than anything. But after years of trying, the doctor told me I couldn't have children." He said it kindly, but it broke something inside me. My husband tried to hide his disappointment, but I could feel it every day. After he passed, I never thought I'd belong anywhere again. Luke listened without interrupting. When she finished, she turned away, ashamed of her own truth. "I understand if you don't want me here anymore," she murmured. "A woman who can't." But he cut her off gently, his tone firm and warm. "Clara," he said, "I didn't hire you to give me children. I've already got enough kids to fill a schoolhouse. I hired you because this place needed someone with heart, and you've got more of that than anyone I've met." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She looked up at him, searching his face for mockery, but found only sincerity. "Good," he added with a faint smile. "Because I've got enough kids for both of us." From that night on, something changed between them. Clara stopped hiding behind her pain. She laughed more. She let the little ones climb into her lap without fear of breaking. Luke noticed the softness in her voice when she called them in for supper. And the way her eyes lingered on him just a little longer each day. The ranch began to thrive again. The animals were healthier, the children happier. Luke found himself whistling while mending fences, something he hadn't done since before his wife passed. Clara became part of their rhythm, their unspoken home. One late afternoon, a storm came suddenly, fierce and wild. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, and one of the horses broke loose. Luke ran out into the rain, and before he could stop her, Clara followed. Together, they wrestled the frightened animal back into the barn, soaked to the bone. When it was over, Luke looked at her, drenched, trembling, hair clinging to her face, and something inside him shifted. He stepped closer, his hand brushing a raindrop from her cheek. She froze, breath catching. "You shouldn't have come out here," he said, voice low. "You shouldn't have gone alone," she replied. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain fell harder, pounding on the roof, until finally, he said, "You don't have to keep proving yourself, Clara. You're already part of this family." Her heart twisted, she wanted to believe him. But years of emptiness made her afraid. I'm not what most men want, she whispered. I can't give you more children. I can't. He silenced her with a look that melted every wall she'd built. I don't need more children, he said softly. I need someone who loves the ones I've got. Someone who reminds me what peace feels like. She tried to look away, but he tilted her chin up gently. You're enough, he murmured. You always were. That night, something in her heart finally healed. Weeks turned into months. The ranch flourished. The children began calling her Ma, without realizing it. And though Luke never asked her to take his name, it was as if she already had. In every meal she cooked, every tear she wiped, every smile she brought back to their home. Sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the children ran laughing through the fields, Luke would watch her from the porch, her hair glowing in the light, her laughter mingling with theirs, and he'd think how strange it was that a woman who believed she had nothing left to give had given them everything they needed. She had filled every empty space he'd thought would stay hollow forever. And though she'd once thought her story ended with loss, out here, under the endless sky, she'd found a new beginning, not as a mother by birth, but by love. And that, Luke often thought, was the truest kind of miracle. The days rolled on, steady and sure, marked by the rhythm of hooves on hard-packed dirt and the laughter of children echoing through the ranch yard. Clara had become the beating heart of the Granger Ranch without realizing it. She moved through the days with quiet grace, tending the garden, sewing small shirts that always seemed to rip at the elbows, baking biscuits that disappeared before they even cooled. Luke had always believed that a rancher's life left no room for softness. He'd buried his heart beside his late wife, promising himself he'd never love again, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't think he could survive losing someone twice. But Clara changed that. She didn't come into his life demanding anything, she simply brought warmth to a home that had grown cold. The children adored her. Emma, the oldest, had once refused to speak of her mother, but now followed Clara everywhere. Jacob, wild and headstrong, began to settle down under her gentle scolding. And little Sarah, barely 5, clung to Clara's skirts as if afraid she'd vanish if she let go. It was one evening in early spring when Luke realized just how much Clara meant to them all. He'd returned late from a neighboring ranch after helping mend a broken fence. As he approached the house, he saw the lamplight glowing through the window and heard laughter inside. He paused before the door. Clara was reading a story to the children. Her voice was soft, melodic, carrying a tenderness that stirred something deep inside him. Sarah sat in her lap, thumb in her mouth, fighting sleep. Emma leaned against her shoulder, while Jacob sat cross-legged on the floor pretending not to be interested. When she reached the end of the story, Clara smiled and closed the book. Now, she said, who's going to say their prayers? Jacob groaned. Ma always used to make us. Clara's smile faltered for just a second at the mention of the word Ma. She looked at him gently. Then we'll do it for her, all right. And they did, heads bowed, hands clasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke stood at the door, unseen, and in that quiet moment, his chest tightened. He realized he hadn't prayed since his wife died. Not because he'd stopped believing, but because he'd stopped hoping. Yet, listening to Clara, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace. When the children were finally asleep, Luke stepped inside. Clara was still by the fire, mending a tear in Jacob's shirt. She looked up, startled. Oh, I didn't hear you come in, she said, setting the shirt aside. Didn't want to interrupt, he replied, his voice low. She smiled faintly. They're good kids. You've done a fine job with them. He shook his head. No, Clara, you're the one keeping this place from falling apart. I see the way they look at you, the way I look at you. Her hands trembled slightly. Luke, don't, she whispered. But he took a step closer. I need to say this. I thought I was done with love. I thought what I had before was all I'd ever get. But you've brought life back into this house, Clara. Into me. She looked away, her throat tightening. You don't know what you're saying. You're lonely, that's all. You miss your wife, and I. He cut her off gently. I miss her, yes. But missing someone doesn't mean you stop living. I see you, Clara. You think because you can't bear children that you've got nothing left to give. But you've given me more than anyone ever has. You gave my kids their laughter back. You gave me peace. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. It isn't fair to you. A man like you deserves a family, a real one. Someone who can. He smiled faintly. I told you before, I've got enough kids for both of us. What I don't have is someone who makes me want to come home at night. Her lips parted, but no words came. Luke's hand reached out, brushing against hers. I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Just, don't shut me out. And with that, he turned and walked out, leaving her staring at the flickering firelight, heart racing like a wild horse. The following weeks were filled with quiet tension. Luke didn't push, but the air between them hummed with something unspoken. She caught him watching her sometimes, when she braided Sarah's hair, or when she wiped flour from her hands, smiling absent-mindedly at the children. One afternoon, Emma ran to her breathless. Miss Clara. Pa stuck out by the ridge. The storm came fast, the rivers rising. Without hesitation, Clara grabbed her shawl and rode out. Rain pounded her face, lightning streaked across the sky, but she didn't stop. When she reached the ridge, she found Luke knee-deep in the rushing current, trying to pull a trapped calf to safety. Luke, she shouted, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Get back, he yelled, water splashing high. But she didn't. She threw off her shawl and waded in, gripping the rope he'd tied to the calf. Together, soaked and shaking, they pulled until the animal stumbled free onto the bank. By the time they dragged themselves out, they were both trembling from cold and exhaustion. Luke turned to her, hair plastered to his forehead. I told you to stay back. And let you drown, she snapped, voice breaking. You think I could just stand by? He stared at her, something fierce and raw flashing in his eyes. Then, suddenly, he reached out, pulling her close, his lips crashing against hers. The rain poured down, the world spinning around them, but all Clara could feel was the warmth of his mouth and the steady, desperate beat of his heart. When he pulled back, breathless, he whispered, That's twice now you've come running when I was too stubborn to ask for help. She managed a shaky laugh. You're impossible. And you're the best thing that's happened to me since the day I learned how to ride, he said softly. After that, everything changed, though neither of them spoke of it openly. The children noticed first. Emma started calling her, Ma. Without hesitation, Jacob began showing off his drawings to her, and Sarah refused to sleep unless Clara tucked her in. One evening, as they all sat around the table, Jacob blurted, Pa, when's Miss Clara gonna stay forever? The room fell silent. Clara's heart stopped. Luke looked at her, eyes gentle but sure. Well, he said finally, that depends on Miss Clara. She looked at the children, then at Luke, at the home she never thought she'd have. Tears pricked her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude, not grief. That night, after the children had gone to bed, she stepped out onto the porch where Luke stood, gazing at the stars. The air was cool, sweet with the scent of rain-soaked earth. I never thought I'd find a place where I belonged, she said softly. But this feels like home. He turned to her, a small smile curving his lips. It is home, Clara. And it's yours if you want it. She took a slow breath. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared that you'll wake up one day and realize I can't give you the life you deserve. He reached out, took her hands in his, and said, The only life I want is the one we're building, right here, right now. You've already given me everything I'll ever need. The stars shimmered above them, and for the first time in years, she let herself believe it. From that night on, there was no more hesitation. They worked side by side, laughed together, shared quiet mornings over coffee before the children woke. Luke built her a small garden near the porch, roses, her favorite, and she baked him pies he always said were too good for a cowboy. Sometimes, she'd catch him watching her with that same quiet awe, and she'd smile, knowing they'd both found something rare, love that wasn't born from youth or perfection, but from healing and choice. On Sundays, they'd ride out to the hill overlooking the ranch, the children racing ahead, their laughter mingling with the wind. And Luke would glance at her and whisper, You see this, Clara? This is our family. Just like I said, enough kids for both. And every time, she'd laugh through her tears, because she finally understood that love wasn't about what you could give by blood, it was about what you could give by heart. The Granger Ranch became known not just for its thriving cattle, but for the warmth that radiated from it, a home built not from perfection, but from second chances, forgiveness, and faith. And though the world around them kept changing, their love stayed as steady as the plains, quiet, vast, and endless beneath the Texas sky.